Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. As promised, I have a video for you on a Friday, a short one where I'll be solving some of your problems, updating you on the injuries of Isak and JOAO Pedro and their replacements, and also looking at Wildcard 6 and a couple of other things, just so you can plan a little bit easier and it helps your moves this week. As you can see, we've got off to a great start, so if you would like to cash in on that success, please do consider subscribing. And a lot of you who have watched and have supported so generously, you haven't subscribed either. So if you could do so, I'd be very appreciative. But like I said, it's a short one, so let's get in. I'm going to start with what is likely the most important topic of this week, and that is Mohamed Salah. Now, I know a lot of you own him, and I know a lot of you are going to captain him. There is, however, something for you, even if you are doing those two things. For those that don't own him, if you don't, fair enough. I understand the approach, and I was definitely considering it at one point. I do, however, think the upside is so big here. And with Watkins having reduced expected minutes and a lot of you not being too bullish on Eze, I really don't see any captaincy options that come even remotely close to the quality of Mohamed Salah this week. Now let's speak about him against Bournemouth, right? And what can we expect? Against Forest, it was a very, very different occasion, and you're playing a very different type of team under a very different type of coach. And the conditions that Forest provided were certainly suboptimal for him. Bournemouth, however, I think will do something quite different. They're going to press, and they're going to press high. At home, with a smaller pitch, the distances that they're going to have to press will always be smaller. Thus, it's always going to work in favour of those who are pressing high, especially when you consider going away to Anfield and a bigger ground. And just the fact that you've got home advantage anyway, right? As for all the teams. However, here, when they press Liverpool, not only will the spaces be bigger, but look at the type of players they're playing against. They've got Trent and Virgil van Dijk, both of whom, with one pass, could completely bypass that press. And then you've also got a pivot in McAllister and Gravenberch, who offer you different things. Gravenberch, definitely from that second phase, his carrying has been so impressive this season. I think he's actually much more suited there than playing higher up the pitch. McAllister between the lines is brilliant, receiving on the half turn, just being able to progress. So good in that fast set. And I do think that they'll have quite a lot of success against Bournemouth's high press. Do I expect Bournemouth to be successful sometimes? Yes. Do I think Bournemouth could score? Absolutely. I especially think with Alisson out, your Trent and Robbo clean sheets are now in a significantly more danger. Especially like you don't really want to play a team that is pressing you high. You'd rather play a Forest if you wanted to compete. But for goals, which is what we're looking at here, I think that could be really good for Salah because when they do bypass that press, you'll get yourself into a lot of isolated situations. You'll be able to bypass maybe the first 4, 5, 6 players and leave your backline, they'll leave Bournemouth's backline quite isolated. You saw that just in instances with Newcastle and Bournemouth. Now, Newcastle really didn't capitalize on it. They did have those instances occasionally. Now, with Liverpool's greater quality and also with the way that Szoboszlai is stationed, I think not only will they will not have a numerical disadvantage, but also the quality just to leverage in those one-on-one isolated situations. You saw what Salah did when Man United presented him with a similar type of opportunity. He was ruthless. AC Milan did that to an extent, and he hit the bar twice, right? So he really could have had a haul against AC Milan, and I think he's very, very unlikely to blank against Bournemouth. And as a result, when the ceiling is so high, and I really do think the ceiling is so high with this fixture, I would really consider if you don't have him. The other thing is, with a lot of people wildcarding 6, and you look at their team structure, a lot of them are going without Salah. Now, whether I disagree or agree, you're going to see when I build the wildcard 6 draft. But you'll have him as a differential, and I think that is super powerful, given there's actually not that many good midfield options, so you may as well have the best one, right? And that is certainly something to consider as a plus point to getting him. Not only do you get him for 5, but if you're not wildcarding in 6, you're going to have him on a lot of people, especially amongst the engaged managers, are simply not going to. So my view on Isak and JOAO Pedro is that I think both of them are going to miss out this week. I think Isak hasn't trained this week. JOAO Pedro, well, Hertz's comments on JOAO Pedro haven't been exactly positive, right? We have no idea what the type of intensity of training he's been doing. And does he really need to risk him in this fixture when he's got such a hard run coming up? No, he probably doesn't, right? Do Brighton have enough firepower? Yes, they do. Now, obviously, they're playing against Sells and Nottingham Forest, so it's going to be very difficult. But there's still enough there for them to perform. At least the manager should think. So I actually think both of them are going to miss out this week. And these are my 3 favorite replacements. Now, if you've got the money and with the team structure, it's right for you, you can definitely go up to an Ollie Watkins. Sure, his minutes will be reduced this week, but over the next 5, I am super bullish, as you will see in the captaincy section. And I think he's going to score the most points out of any forward in the next 5, bar Haaland. So I really, really like him. Sure, he's got reduced 70 minutes, expected minutes. We'll call it 70 to maybe even 65 minutes. But that's enough against the Wolves side that certainly looks susceptible to conceding goals, especially against good strikers, just given their game model. I really like Dominic Calvert-Lewin as a cheap option. talisman, penalties, good expected minutes, great expected minutes. Everton look fine going forward, like creatively. There's no real issues there. The fixture run is brilliant for ages, and he's a player who I think is still underrated to an extent. This guy's got 16 goals and 6 assists in 2021, where it was a completely different era of football compared to now, right? That is so impressive. And it's not like he did it for a big 16 either. And I think if he's fit this year, you may as well judge him as a completely different player to last year. I think you have to take that into account. He's such a brilliant enabler as well. So for me, and I really like what I saw against Villa. I thought in a lot of ways he was very impressive. So I'm more than happy to go there. And then the other one would be Chris Wood, set and forget. Now his minutes have been a lot better than I expected, and his record under Nuno is fantastic. So I don't really see this changing at all. I think similar to the likes of Eze and Havertz in terms of proximity theory and zonal dominance, he's fantastic, right? He's always stationed in that old school style number 9 type of role and position. Mainly the position. And he's a bit of a magnet towards the ball because Morgan Gibbs-White is a different type of player. He's brilliant at progressing, brilliant at carrying. The ball gets played into Wood a lot. He's not like a Foden where he has a super high volume of shots and he's in and around those pockets consistently. He doesn't really drift into the channels too much like an older Watkins used to do. The wingers are always supplying him. The fixtures are pretty good. Forest looks solid. So for me, and he's great on the bonus point system when he scores especially. So for me, I really like Chris Wood. I think he's someone who's going under the radar. Now, I thought it was worthwhile to visit Manchester City and see could they potentially have some really nice prospects for us down the line, and maybe even for some of you guys on Wildcard 6. I'll actually start with Lewis and Gvardiol. I obviously spoke about in my preview and the video, which is titled Everything You Need to Know, which I will link in the description, about how Gvardiol could be a great option and why he could be a great option. And one of the reasons was you can't expect Lewis to play every game. However, I do think as a fourth defender, if you've got 3 very solid defenders ahead of him, maybe like a Gabriel or Robinson and someone else, then if you can time when Lewis isn't going to play, when he looks likely to play, for example, the games where there's not huge transitional threat on that left side where you need Walker, I think the opposition's left side, I think he could actually be a really good fourth option. And maybe even pair him with Gvardiol and go for a double up there if you wanted to go Haaland and them too. That is certainly something to consider for you guys. And I do really see a lot of upside here in the City defenders, specifically those two. Fixtures are good, and both of them will have attacking prospects when they aren't the ones who form a back three, and Rico Lewis will never do that. So definitely something to consider there. Now, the other thing that I'd like to look at is, does Foden come into the fold as an option? And this is obviously on the assumption that De Bruyne is injured, but regardless, maybe even if he's not injured long term, there's significant rotation, etc. And obviously, it's all dependent on expected minutes, but assuming they're good, he's a very different type of player to KDB. I just spoke about how in the last section, he's always in those pockets and he's got a high volume of shots. He's not as generous as he doesn't play as many of those penetrated passes into Haaland. He's not looking to be as much of a passer as De Bruyne. He really is more output orientated, specifically in terms of goals, I would say, and shooting from range, given his ball striking is so he chooses to leverage that. So with that in mind, I just think that if you are on Wildcard 6, if you're not, this is just something to have in the back of your mind. I thought given we had the Atalanta game last night, it made sense just to go over captaincy again for Haaland and the fact that we might have a De Bruyne injury. If that is to be the case and he is to miss out for the reasons in the last section, I think that's quite a big deal, and you really need to consider his prospects there as a result. But also, look at Arteta as a manager, look at his philosophy, look what it's always been for, or at least for a number of years. Look how resolute Arsenal have been defensively against Spurs, and that too without Rice. Look at the transitional threat they pose, and maybe City will have to account for that, so it becomes even more cagey, etc., right? Look at Haaland, the amount of space he'll have, well, it'll be very little. Expect Arsenal to set up deep again and very compact. So for all those reasons, especially when other options exist that have higher ceilings this week, I would say, and probably even higher floors, I really do think this is a good opportunity to go past him, especially when a lot of people would just, I'd say, mindlessly captain him to an extent without giving it too much thought, or at least the thought it deserves. A lot of people don't like my shout on Eze captaincy. Again, I spoke about that in the preview, but just remember that his points aren't indicative of his performances. Against Brentford, he should have returned. Against West Ham, he really should have returned. And against Leicester, he could have easily returned as well. He could be sitting as the 3rd highest scoring midfielder. He could honestly be sitting with more points than Salah, given the performances he's had. And had he been as ruthless and efficient with his final actions as Salah has been, and maybe he had the penalty, honestly, he could have been on more points. So I really wouldn't think of selling him this week, but I also would be comfortable captaining him. He would definitely be my vice captain. And if I didn't have Salah, I would captain him. I obviously spoke about how much I like Watkins. And if you are prepared to take the expected minutes risk, I'm fine going there should you not own Salah. Like I spoke about with Wolves, the game model, I think they're always susceptible to good strikers punishing them, and Watkins will certainly be no different to that. Finally, and what I think is actually the most important part of this video, is the Wildcard 6 draft. Now, the reason I thought of building this is to show you that, honestly, I don't think it's that impressive, and this is not a wildcard that screams points and that you really, really need to wildcard for. Now, obviously, the fixtures are different and it'll look much prettier when you have Mbeumo at home to West Ham and Arsenal don't play City, etc., right? But if you look at it, do you really, really need to break up your team to get this? And do you need to use the wildcard? Well, you probably already own Haaland. You're probably already going to have Salah this week. Okay. Mbeumo is not exactly difficult to get to, given he's 7-1. You probably have Rodgers. You probably have a cheap midfielder anyway in Smith Rowe, or maybe you have a Calvert-Lewin. And then apart from that, all of the defense is cheap, so the routes to them, again, are pretty easy. It's really just Saka and Havertz. It's really just that Arsenal triple up where I'd say the huge upside lies. And maybe if you wanted to double City defense or double, I don't know, Brentford defense, I wouldn't do that, but as an example, right? And you don't need to break your team for that. I think with some ease, at least, you could get to Saka. And if you had to forego Salah, then so be it, right? It's not the end of the world. He won't be too high in terms of effective ownership, at least compared to this week. Havertz, I wouldn't say is essential. Sure, he's definitely preferable over the next two, but it's not like he's the most prolific goal scorer you've ever seen. It's not like he's putting up Erling Haaland numbers. And if you don't have an optimal team for 1 or 2 weeks, okay, cool. Arsenal's run only lasts like 2 weeks, a good run, and then it's Bournemouth away, which isn't even that easy. And then it's Liverpool, then it's Newcastle, then it's Chelsea. You don't need to have them and use this chip so early on in the season when you could genuinely not use another wildcard for another 25 weeks to get these two. I think, okay, fine, you probably miss out on some points. There's no reason that your other good players can't perform. And I honestly just thought I would show you this to show you that it's really not that good. Yeah, sure, it would be nice to have, but this isn't a wildcard I think that's worth breaking your team apart for. If you have to take a hit to get triple Arsenal or even double Arsenal, so be it. It's just 4 points. There's no way in any world that 4 points is equivalent to a wildcard. What happens in game week, I don't know, 16, where huge amount of injuries happen, it's the Christmas break, someone catches fire, someone's in awful form, and you need to make 10 changes to your team. That's quite a realistic scenario to an extent. And you won't have that in your pocket, all because you decided to get Saka and Havertz, both of them instead of one, and save 4 points in just for 2 weeks. Don't think it's worth it. So this is what I would deem to be the best wildcard draft at the moment. And given that I don't think it's that impressive, I would really urge you to at least reconsider what your thinking is when it comes to wildcard. And that is all she wrote for today. As you can see, we've got to a flying start. So if you could consider subscribing, I would really, really appreciate that. Especially those of you who have been watching regularly and not subscribing, which is like 70% of you. That would be great. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck this week. Make sure to check out my previous 2 videos for insights into my team and also the game week preview, which will just cover everything. Salah captain this week. I'm looking forward to it. I'm positive, I'm optimistic, and I'm expecting to have a good weekend. So, like I said, I hope you have a magnificent weekend, a magnificent game week, and I shall see you very, very soon for Transfer Plans Game Week 6 on Sunday.